They say every soldier needs a home to come back to. For Jack Turner, a 35-year-old Marine Corps veteran, that home was a small cottage in the Seattle suburbs, where he lived with his wife, Sophia. No one would have guessed that behind the facade of their perfect marriage lurked a dark secret. Sophia Turner, born Ramirez, the owner of the upscale, pure white bridal salon chain, wasn't who she seemed. In a previous life, she had a different name and was part of the inner circle of one of the most dangerous criminals in Las Vegas. But 5 years ago, she'd stolen $12 million from her boss and lover, starting a new life. And now, that past had caught up to their quiet harbor. The spring sun slowly rose over the horizon, painting the Seattle sky in soft pastels. Inside the 2-story house on Cedar Street, life was already in full swing. Sophia busied herself in the kitchen, making breakfast, while Jack got ready for another haul. She had deliberately chosen this quiet suburb. It was easy to get lost among the other respectable middle-class families. "Jack," she called, placing plates of steaming breakfast on the table. "Come on down, it's gonna get cold." Heavy footsteps echoed on the stairs. Jack appeared in the kitchen, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn leather jacket. The scar on his right cheek, a keepsake from shrapnel in Kandahar, had faded. But Sophia knew. Every night he dreamt of the 2 friends he'd lost in that fight. Eggs Benedict?" He smiled, kissing his wife on the cheek. "You know I don't deserve a culinary queen like you." Sophia laughed, but a flicker of unease crossed her dark eyes. Every time her husband said he didn't deserve her, she felt a pang of guilt. If only he knew. Their meeting 5 years ago had been like a scene from a romance movie. Sophia, then going by Rosa Mendez, had stopped at a roadside diner called Johnny's during her escape from Vegas. She'd been planning this operation for months. New documents, a cover story, offshore accounts, 12 million and a flash drive with compromising information on O'Hara's entire empire. She knew it was a one-way ticket, either a new life or death. That evening, she was sitting at a back table, nervously stirring her lukewarm coffee, when she heard the roar of a diesel engine. A huge truck pulled into the lot, and a minute later, a tall man in a worn denim jacket walked into the diner. She immediately noticed his military bearing and the fresh scar on his cheek. "Excuse me, ma'am." His deep voice made her jump. "But I think you dropped this." He was holding out a silk scarf, a gift from O'Hara, which she'd completely forgotten. Their eyes met, and something clicked inside. His green eyes held the same weariness and loneliness she saw in the mirror every morning. "Jack Turner," he introduced himself, long-haul trucker and part-time rescuer of silk scarves from beautiful strangers. Rosa Mendez." She was surprised at how easily she lied. "Join me? The coffee's terrible here, but they say the apple pie is pretty good." They talked until dawn. Jack told her about his service in the Marines, how after his discharge he couldn't fit back into civilian life and found peace in long hauls. She listened, and for the first time in a long time she felt safe. "Penny for your thoughts?" Her husband's voice brought her back to reality. "Just thinking about when we first met." Sophia smiled, straightening his collar. "Remember that apple pie? How could I forget? Worst pie I ever had, but the best night ever." He kissed her forehead. "All right, I gotta get going. Last run before the weekend." After her husband left, Sophia went to the Pure White main office. In 5 years, she had turned the chain of bridal salons into a thriving business with millions in revenue. She hadn't chosen this niche by accident. The large cash flow was perfect for laundering the stolen money. Her office was on the top floor of a modern business center. Panoramic windows offered a view of Elliott Bay and the skyscrapers of Seattle's business district. Sophia was going through documents for a meeting with bankers when her assistant, Amanda, came into the office. Mrs. Turner, the bank representatives confirmed the meeting for 2 o'clock. She placed a folder with documents on the table. They're ready to discuss a line of credit for the expansion of the chain. Sophia nodded. Every document was checked down to the last comma. That's what O'Hara had taught her. Michael the Snake O'Hara. She tried not to think about him, but sometimes at night she'd wake up in a cold sweat, remembering his steely gaze and the voice that could make your blood run cold. The meeting with the bankers went smoothly. Sophia was a virtuoso at juggling numbers, talking about her business development plans. None of those present could have imagined that this elegant businesswoman was once a streetwalker in Vegas until O'Hara saw her potential and made her his protege. That evening, Jack came home early. They sat on the porch, enjoying the sunset and discussing their future plans. Sophia sipped red wine, while her husband drank his favorite craft beer. I was doing some figuring. Jack placed a worn notebook with calculations on the table. If everything goes as planned, in a couple of months I'll be able to get a loan for my own truck. I'm tired of working for the man. Honey, why a loan? Sophia put down her glass. We have savings. I could. No. He gently but firmly interrupted her. You already do way too much for us. This has got to be mine. You know, she knew. Jack had always been like that, honest to the core. She loved him for it, and she hated herself for her lies. Suddenly, the quiet of the evening was broken by the sound of an approaching car. A black Cadillac Escalade with tinted windows slowly drove past their house and stopped. Sophia went cold. She knew this car. O'Hara always preferred them black, like his soul. Jack? Her voice trembled, but she didn't get to finish. The front door was kicked off its hinges with a crash. Time has a strange way of stretching out in critical moments of life. For Sophia, the next few minutes became an eternity. She saw, in slow motion, 2 men in black suits burst into their living room. Behind them, slowly tapping his cane on the wooden floor, came Michael the Snake, O'Hara himself trim, graying, in an impeccable gray Brioni suit. His steely eyes immediately found Sophia. Jack reacted like a Marine lightning fast. But against 3 professionals, one of whom was holding a gun, he didn't stand a chance. A short scuffle ended with him being thrown onto the coffee table. The glass shattered into fragments. No, please don't, Sophia cried, as Ray, the butcher Donovan, O'Hara's loyal assistant, pinned her husband's arms behind his back. What a touching scene! O'Hara lowered himself into an armchair, crossing his leg over the other. A dutiful wife protecting her beloved husband. Tell me, Sophia, or should I call you Rosa? Or maybe Carmen, like they called you when I found you on the streets of Vegas. Jack froze, looking from his wife to the uninvited guest in bewilderment. Oh! O'Hara clapped his hands dramatically. Didn't you tell your dear hubby about our shared past? About how I found you, an 18-year-old hooker with an unfinished law degree and big ambitions. How I gave you an education, made you my right hand. Shut up, Sophia shouted, but O'Hara just smirked. Tell him, darling, how you managed my legal businesses, how you laundered money through the casino chain, how you warmed my bed. He paused, enjoying the effect of his words. And how one night you stole $12 million and a flash drive with very important information. Jack stopped resisting. His face froze into a stone mask. Only his jaw muscles twitched under his skin. Sophia saw how in his eyes the thing she loved so much slowly faded, that limitless trust. Ray, O'Hara nodded to his assistant. Explain to Mr. Turner what we do to those who betray us. The first blow landed on Jack's solar plexus. From the second to the jaw, he bit his tongue. Blood stained his white shirt crimson. Sophia lunged towards her husband, but the third thug held her back. 20 million, O'Hara said, getting up from his chair. with interest for 5 years. You have a month, Sophia. Otherwise, he nodded at Jack, who Ray was methodically turning into a bloody mess. I'll start sending him to you piece by piece. The thugs left as abruptly as they had appeared. Sophia rushed to her husband, trying to stop the bleeding with paper napkins. In her head, O'Hara's mocking voice echoed, 20 million, 20 million. Why? Jack's voice was hoarse with pain. They were sitting in the hospital waiting room, waiting for an X-ray. Why didn't you tell me? Sophia was silent, twisting a bloody handkerchief in her hands. How to explain to a man that his whole life for the past 5 years had been built on a lie? I have to tell you everything, she finally said. From the very beginning, Vegas 7 years ago. 18-year-old Sofia Ramirez was standing on the corner of Fremont Street, shivering in the cold in a short dress. 3 months ago, she'd had to drop out of law school. There was no money for tuition, and her dreams of a career as a lawyer had been shattered by harsh reality. That's when she first met O'Hara. His Cadillac had stopped next to her, and he'd offered her dinner, not sex. At dinner, he asked her about her life, her studies, her dreams, and then made an offer to become his protege. You have a sharp mind and a pretty face, he'd said then. I'll teach you how to use both. The next 2 years were like a roller coaster. O'Hara paid for her tuition at business school, hired tutors in etiquette and finance. She was a capable student. She quickly mastered the intricacies of laundering money through legal businesses, learned to negotiate with bankers and politicians, and then she became his lover. Not by force, O'Hara never used force. It just seemed to her that at some point she'd fallen in love with this dangerous, powerful man. I was a fool. Sophia wiped away tears. I thought he loved me, and then I found out the truth. What truth? Jack winced with pain as the nurse cleaned his battered face. About what he was really doing. Not just money laundering, human trafficking, drugs, contract killings. I accidentally found files on his computer. It had everything: names, dates, amounts. I copied the information onto a flash drive and stole the money. Jack finished for her. 12 million in cash. I planned the escape for 3 months, new documents, a cover story, an escape route. And then I met you. A heavy silence hung in the hospital corridor. Sophia saw her husband fighting with himself, the desire to push her away. The liar struggled with the desire to protect her. So our marriage, that was also a lie? He finally asked. No. She grabbed his hand, ignoring the dried blood. I swear, it's the only real thing in my life. I loved you at first sight in that diner. You were so honest, genuine. Jack closed his eyes. His chest rose and fell heavily. We have a month, he finally said. Where's the money? Most of it is invested in the business. About 5 million in offshore accounts. But 20. She shook her head. I need time to sell everything. No. Jack opened his eyes, and Sophia flinched. They had the same look she remembered from his stories about the war. We don't have time, but I have a plan. An abandoned industrial warehouse on the outskirts of Seattle met Jack Turner with a grave-like coldness. Through broken windows under the ceiling, rays of the morning sun broke through, creating a bizarre play of light and shadow on the concrete floor. Holding his hand against his bruised ribs, he slowly walked around the room, mentally recreating the battle plan. Everything here has to be perfect, he muttered to himself, taking out a worn notebook. No randomness, no mistakes. The past few days after O'Hara's invasion had turned their cozy home into a military headquarters. Jack seemed to have returned 10 years ago to his old life. A life where every decision could be his last. You're out of your mind. Mike Rodriguez, his old Marine Corps intelligence buddy, was looking at the blueprints spread out on the kitchen table. This isn't Kandahar, bro. This is civilian territory. They stopped being civilians when they broke into my house. Jack pointed to the warehouse blueprint. Look, first line of defense, tripwires with signal grenades. Not live ones, just noise and light. Here and here we'll set up booby traps with firecrackers. The bruises on his face had not yet faded, but his eyes burned with the cold fury of a professional soldier. Sophia, watching her husband from the doorway, hardly recognized him as the kind and calm man she had married. How long will it take to prepare? Mike was making notes in his notebook. A week, 10 days max. Jack unfolded a new drawing. I need materials. Wire, firecrackers, flares, construction tools. Nothing illegal. Everything can be bought at ordinary stores. Meanwhile, Sophia launched her own operation. She methodically called potential buyers, met with brokers, appraisers, and lawyers. Her pure white chain of bridal salons had to go under the hammer, piece by piece. For 3 salons. She placed the documents in front of Jack on the 3rd evening. It's the best offer. Sell, he nodded, not looking up from studying a diagram. But don't tell O'Hara about the real amount. Let him think we've collected all 20. Sophia sank into a chair, massaging her temples. Jack, maybe we should just give them what we have? I can sell everything, borrow from friends. No. He finally looked up from his papers. If we start negotiating, they'll think we're weak. And they destroy the weak. I saw that in the war. The warehouse was transforming day by day. Jack and Mike worked like possessed, turning the abandoned building into a real training ground. Every entrance, every window, every dark corner became part of a carefully planned defense system. There will be a tripwire with a smoke bomb. Jack was stretching a thin wire between the columns. When it goes off, smoke will fill the entire space. In the dark and panic, they won't notice the main traps. Mike was securing camouflage netting over one of the improvised pits. And this won't actually kill anyone? He nodded at the sharpened stakes at the bottom. No, if they're careful. Jack checked the wire's tension. The main thing is to make them lose their balance, distract their attention. Like we were taught in intelligence, create chaos and use it. By the end of the week, the preparations were entering the final stretch. Sophia had already sold 5 salons, raising almost 7 million. Jack had perfected the system of traps, turning the warehouse into a real maze of fear. Now we need to make them come here, he said, looking at his wife. Call him. Say the money is ready. With trembling fingers, Sophia dialed a number she once knew by heart. O'Hara answered immediately. I hope you have good news, darling. His voice was calm and polite as always. The money has been collected. She tried to sound confident. All 20 million. But the meeting is on my terms. And what are those? The old army warehouse on Industrial Road. Tomorrow at midnight. Pause. Interesting choice of location. There was a slight hint of mockery in his voice. All right, darling. Tomorrow at midnight. When the call ended, Sophia looked at her husband. He gave a short nod. The first part of the plan was complete. On the last night before the operation, Jack couldn't sleep. He was sitting in the garage, checking and rechecking his gear. Flares, smoke bombs, ropes, flashlights, everything was arranged in place with military precision. Sophia found him there long after midnight. I'm so sorry, she whispered, hugging him from behind. It's all my fault. No, he squeezed her hand. It's the fault of the one who came to our house with threats, and he will regret it tomorrow. In the darkness of the garage, his eyes flashed with steel, the eyes of a Marine, ready for battle. Tomorrow should change everything. One way or another. The night was moonless. Thick clouds covered the sky over Seattle, turning the industrial area into a black sea of shadows. Jack Turner took up position on the metal gallery of the abandoned warehouse an hour before the appointed time. His fingers absently stroked the handle of the flare gun, the only weapon he had decided to use. In his earpiece, Mike's quiet voice sounded. 3 cars are approaching from the east side. A black Escalade and 2 Suburbans. Looks like your princess didn't lie about the time of the meeting. Jack glanced down, where Sophia stood in the dim light of the only lamp. She was dressed in a strict black suit, the very one in which she once made the first deals for O'Hara. In her hands, a leather briefcase. Empty, of course, but only the 3 of them knew that. "Remember the plan," Jack whispered into the microphone. "No improvisation. As soon as it starts, get her out through the west exit." The sound of approaching cars broke the silence at exactly midnight. The headlights picked out the silhouette of Sophia standing in the middle of the empty space. She didn't move, only gripped the briefcase more tightly. O'Hara appeared first, a tall figure in a gray suit. He was followed by 6 thugs, including the massive Ray, the butcher Donovan. Their heavy footsteps echoed under the warehouse roof. "Sophia, darling." O'Hara's voice was almost gentle. "How imprudent of you to choose such a secluded place. The money is here." She raised the briefcase. 20 million in cash, as you asked." Of course, of course." O'Hara signaled his men. "Ray, please check it." Donovan stepped forward, and at that moment the first trap went off. The thin wire, invisible in the twilight, gave way under his foot. A deafening bang of a signal flare made everyone flinch. White smoke instantly filled the room. "What the hell?" Donovan's cry was drowned out by a series of new explosions. Jack's plan worked perfectly. In panic and confusion, O'Hara's thugs began shooting blindly, only adding to the chaos. Signal flares flashed here and there through the smoke, turning the warehouse into a surreal disco. Mike, precisely following instructions, was already pulling Sophia to the emergency exit. Jack saw her resisting, not wanting to leave him alone, but there was no time to argue. And then all hell broke loose. One by one, O'Hara's men fell into the traps. Someone fell into a camouflaged pit, someone got tangled in a net, falling off a ladder. Cries of pain and curses mingled with the roar of gunfire. Jack methodically launched flares, creating the illusion that there were many attackers. His military experience turned simple pyrotechnics into an effective weapon of demoralizing the enemy. "Behind you!" someone yelled, and in the next moment Jack felt movement behind him. He turned around just in time to block Donovan's blow. The big guy had somehow made it to the gallery and was now towering over him like an enraged bear. A brutal fight broke out. Jack remembered this man. He was the one who had beaten him in his own house. Now was the time for revenge. A series of precise blows to the solar plexus, a sweep, and Donovan crashed down onto a pile of scrap metal. The smoke was gradually clearing. On the warehouse floor, O'Hara's thugs were lying in different poses, groaning. Some were trying to crawl to the exit. Some were just sitting, leaning against the wall and holding their bruised spots. "Impressive." O'Hara's voice sounded from somewhere in the dark. "Simply impressive." Jack turned sharply. O'Hara was standing in the far corner of the gallery, holding a gun. His gray suit was immaculate, as if all the previous chaos hadn't touched him. "You know, I expected something like this," he continued, taking a step forward. "But I didn't think you'd be so inventive." "Drop the gun." Jack was already calculating his attack options. "Why?" O'Hara smiled. "So we can fight like men?" "Well, all right." To Jack's surprise, he actually threw away the weapon, and in the next moment attacked, lightning fast, professional, without a single unnecessary movement. A fierce duel broke out. O'Hara didn't fight like an ordinary thug. His technique had been honed by years of training. Every blow was aimed for maximum damage. Jack barely managed to block the most dangerous attacks. They circled the gallery, exchanging blows. Blood was pounding in his temples. His breathing became hoarse. At some point, O'Hara unleashed a series of lightning combinations, and Jack was pinned against the railing. "Not bad for a truck driver," O'Hara hissed, preparing to land the decisive blow. "For a Marine," Jack corrected him and launched a counterattack. The technique he used wasn't taught in ordinary martial arts schools. It was a special technique known only to Marine Corps intelligence officers. A grab, a sweep, a throw. O'Hara flew towards the opposite wall, but at the last moment twisted like a cat. Where did you learn that move?" His voice sounded different, with a note of surprise. 3rd Battalion, Marine Corps Intelligence. Jack took a combat stance. Kandahar, 2015. O'Hara froze. For the first time all evening, his face lost its composure. 3rd Battalion? Under the command of Colonel Higgins. "How do you?" But Jack didn't get to finish. O'Hara attacked again, now using the same techniques he himself used. They clashed in a final fight, 2 professional fighters, 2 Marines. A strike, a block, a grab, a final push, and O'Hara was on the floor, pinned to the metal flooring by Jack's knee. "Give up?" Jack growled, twisting his arm. "Charlie 1-1, O'Hara said unexpectedly through clenched teeth. Jack jerked as if struck. It was the call sign of his platoon in Kandahar. "Who the hell are you?" "Michael O'Hara, 1st Battalion, Marine Corps Intelligence." He stopped resisting. "The Gulf, 91. Same platoon, different war." Jack slowly loosened his grip. O'Hara sat up, rubbing his shoulder. "You know, I knew right away that you were military," he smirked. "These traps, we set up the same ones in Kuwait." A strange silence hung in the air. 2 former Marines looked at each other, one covered in bruises and scrapes, the other with a broken lip, but still in an immaculate suit. "How much is it actually?" Jack finally asked. "What? How much does she owe?" "The real amount, without interest or bull." O'Hara was silent, examining his defeated men below. 12 million, he finally said. "Plus the flash drive with data." Jack nodded and got to his feet. "I give you my word as a Marine. The debt will be paid. In full." O'Hara looked at him intently, then also got up. "A Marine's word, you say?" He rubbed his chin. "You know, I've never met a Marine who broke it." History loves irony. The sale of the empire that Sophia had built for 5 years took only 3 weeks. She sat in her office, which had already started to be emptied of furniture, and methodically signed documents for the sale of pure white salons. Each signature brought them closer to freedom, but at the same time echoed with a dull pain somewhere in her chest. After all, she had invested not only stolen money in this business, but also a piece of her soul. "Last contract, Mrs. Turner." An elderly lawyer in round glasses handed her another folder. "After this, the chain of bridal salons will officially pass to the new owners." Sophia paused for a moment, looking at the perfectly straight lines of the contract. $11.5 million, almost the entire amount she had once stolen from O'Hara. She and Jack had collected the remaining $500,000 by selling their house, cars, and all their valuables. "Excuse me for asking," the lawyer coughed delicately, "but are you sure about your decision? The business is thriving. The numbers are growing." "More than sure." Sophia put her last signature. "Sometimes you have to let go of the past to move forward." The old warehouse met them with cold and the smell of metal. Sophia involuntarily shuddered, remembering the events of 2 weeks ago. The smoke from the signal flares, the cries of O'Hara's men, the sounds of fighting. Now it was quiet. Only the wind was blowing under the ceiling and somewhere water was dripping. Jack stood next to her, tightly gripping the leather briefcase with the money. His face had almost healed, only an old bruise was still yellow under his eye. Sophia noticed how his fingers were nervously twitching on the handle of the briefcase. For the first time, she had seen her husband so tense since that day. O'Hara appeared silently, as if woven from shadows. Alone, without guards, as they had agreed. In his perfectly fitting gray Brioni suit, he seemed like an alien element here. And I was already starting to miss this lovely place, he smiled, looking around the room. I hope this time we can do without special effects. 12 million in cash. Jack stepped forward, handing over the briefcase. And the flash drive with the data. Everything as agreed. You can check it. O'Hara accepted the briefcase with a slight nod. He opened it slowly, took out a few bundles and flipped through the bills. You know, Turner, he said, without looking up from the money. In my business, you rarely meet people who actually keep their word. Usually they try to bargain, threaten, or just disappear. But to return everything like this, honestly, down to the last cent. It's a Marine's word, Jack replied. Yeah, a Marine's word. O'Hara closed the briefcase and looked at Sophia intently. You chose a worthy husband, darling. It's a shame our acquaintance started. Not quite successfully. Sophia just clung more tightly to Jack. O'Hara took a few steps towards the exit, but suddenly stopped. By the way, Turner, I heard you wanted to buy your own truck? Start your own business. Jack tensed up. Yeah, I did. What's the difference? O'Hara turned and unexpectedly handed him a stack of money from the briefcase. Here's about 2 million. Now it's your money, Marine, not your wife's. Her debt is closed. I'm sure you'll handle it wisely. Buy yourself a rig. Start an honest business. Why are you doing this? Jack didn't rush to take the money. Because people like you should be doing their own thing, not working for others. O'Hara shrugged. Consider it an investment in an honest man and a brother in arms. Jack slowly accepted the stacks, as if they might explode at any moment. Thank you. Don't mention it. O'Hara headed for the exit. And if you ever need help, call. I always have work for a Marine and a man who keeps his word. His footsteps faded into the darkness of the warehouse, leaving behind a ringing silence and a faint scent of expensive cologne. The following months flew by like a single day. Jack immersed himself in creating his own transport company. He started with one truck, a brand new Peterbilt 579, which he chose as meticulously as if he were buying a spaceship. Turner Logistics. Sophia ran her finger over the fresh inscription on the truck's door. Sounds solid. It's just the beginning. Jack smiled, hugging his wife. In a year, we'll have an entire fleet. He was right. By the end of the year, the company already had 5 trucks and a steady stream of orders. O'Hara kept his word. Several major contracts came through his connections. They chose the coastal town of Astoria in Oregon by accident, just stuck their finger on the map. The small white house on the cliff needed repairs, but the view of the ocean from the terrace made up for all the shortcomings. Sophia enjoyed her new life as a homemaker. No more business meetings, contracts, and endless bookkeeping. Only home, garden, and waiting for her first child. I want a boy, she would say, arranging pots of flowers on the windowsill. As stubborn and honest as his father. Jack just laughed, but she noticed how carefully he stroked her growing belly when he thought she was asleep. The Turner Logistics office was located in a small building in the center of town. Jack spent most of his time there when he wasn't on the road. Sophia sometimes came to him with a homemade lunch and sat for a long time on the couch in the corner, watching her husband work with documents or talk to the drivers. You know, she said one day, I've never seen you so whole, like you've finally found your place. Maybe, he looked thoughtfully out the window, where his trucks were lined up in the parking lot. It's just that now I know for sure that all this is honest, earned by my own work, not he stopped. Sophia got up and hugged him from behind. The past is in the past. Now we have a new life. On Christmas Eve, when the first snow covered the roofs of Astoria with a silvery blanket, the mailman delivered them a card. A simple white envelope without a return address. Inside was a photograph of nighttime Las Vegas and a short note. Semper Fi. P.S. Heard you're expecting a new family member soon? If it's a boy, teach him to keep his word. If it's a girl, teach her to choose men like her father. P.P.S. By the way, Turner, your guys are doing a great job with deliveries. There was no signature, but it wasn't needed. What do you think? Sophia handed the card to her husband. Jack carefully studied the message, then smiled. Sophia laughed and pressed against his shoulder. Snow was falling outside the window, logs were crackling in the fireplace, and somewhere in the depths of the house Christmas music was playing softly. Their new life was just beginning, and for the first time in a long time, it was a truly honest beginning. Somewhere in Las Vegas, in an office on the top floor of a skyscraper, Michael O'Hara placed a photo in a simple frame on the shelf, a picture of two young Marines in full gear against the backdrop of the Afghan mountains. On the back, faded ink read, Semper Fidelis, always faithful. He smiled at his thoughts and returned to studying the trucking report. On the first page was written, Turner Logistics, quarterly delivery statistics. The numbers spoke for themselves. Jack's business was thriving. An honest man in his place, O'Hara thought. Maybe not everything is lost in this world.